Thanks for joining us today here at Autumn Ridge. My name is Derek Freed. I'm one of the pastors, and it's my privilege to be able to share with you this morning. I'm really excited to be able to share with you about what we're going to talk about this morning. And I don't know if you're like me, but I think most of us, if we've ever driven somewhere, we've found ourselves at a moment or a time or a place where we found ourselves lost. We took a turn that we didn't expect. We ended up going farther on a road than we missed our turn. And we live in a great time. We live in a great technological age where we have these beautiful things called cell phones. And these things that are called cell phones have GPS on them. And maybe you have a GPS in your car that's different than your cell phone. Or maybe you're like me and you use your phone. But the great thing about it is when you make a wrong turn or you go past your turn, your GPS in a great boon of technology tells you what? Rerouting. And it figures out a course to get you back on towards your destination. It's great. Wouldn't it be great if there was a GPS for life? Like, wouldn't it be awesome if in your life, when you made a decision that wasn't a good decision, or you found yourself on a road farther down a journey than you thought possible, a voice from the heavens would come out, or a box would appear in the sky and it would say, rerouting. And it would tell you, this is how to get back on the course that you want to be on. That'd be awesome. That would be amazing. The problem is that doesn't exist. We don't have a GPS for life. And so we have to figure it out. And sometimes it doesn't work out. And I was thinking about this idea, and I was thinking about the idea of finding ourselves in a place that we don't want to be. And I was thinking about life, and there's a story that popped into my head that relates to my mom that I found to be very poignant to this. And if you're a parent, you're going to understand this incredibly. I think I was in middle school, end of middle school, high school. I don't remember exactly how old I was. But I was in a disagreement with my mom. And honestly, I don't even remember what the disagreement was. But I'm guessing I either wanted something, I wanted to do something, or I wanted to go somewhere. And my mom was telling me no. And every time she would tell me no, I'd get more upset. And so I'd get more angry. And then I'd want that thing that much more. And then she would tell me no, and it would just increase and increase. And as we're in the midst of this argument, what happened was I got so upset and I got so angry that I looked at my mom and I said this to her. I said, Mom, I hate you and I wish you weren't my mom. And I stormed out of the room. And I stormed to my room and I slammed the door and I was so mad and I was so frustrated. And for whatever reason, she kept telling me no. And then as I calmed down, as I came down from my anger, I started to realize what just happened. The realization hit me that I had just told my mom that I hated her and I didn't want her to be my mom. And as this hit me, just this intense feeling of fear hit me and I started to cry. But here's the thing. There's a distinction I want to make between what was going on with me and what I think goes on with us. See, there was this feeling of guilt. And I think we understand this feeling of guilt. And I want to explain. Guilt is this. Guilt is I did something. I had said something to my mom that I shouldn't have. I had said something to her that hurt her. I did that thing. And I felt guilty about that. But what I felt, the reason I felt so bad, the reason that I was crying was not just because of the guilt that I had done something. What it was shame. And shame is different than guilt, right? Guilt is I did something. Shame is this. Shame is I am something. And so I'm sitting in my room and I'm thinking about what I just did. And in my mind, I start thinking, there's no way back from this. This is now who I am as a person. This is now how my mom will always think of me. I will always forever be the son that told her I hated her and didn't want her to be my mom. And I felt this intense feeling of shame that I now am this thing. I don't know if you're like me, But have you ever been there? Have you ever been in that place where you felt there's no coming back from this? This is now who I am as a person. This is now how people will see me or think about me. And for some of us, that is a big part of us. There is a huge part of us that lives in this feeling of shame of this is now who I am, and it seeps into every little bit of who we are. And for some of us, it's a small part of our life, that it doesn't affect a lot of the things of us, but there's still this small part of us that is that thing, that we will always be that thing. And see, that's the thing when we talk about this idea of rerouting, is that shame wants to make it so that we aren't able to reroute. Shame is the thing that prevents us from rerouting. There's a evangelist, a pastor, and author named Alan Redpath. He was a pastor for a long time. He says this about that. It's Satan's delight to tell me that once he's got me, he will keep me. The enemy wants you to think that there's no coming back. He wants to delight in that. He wants you to think that there's no coming back, that there's no way I can ever be anything other than this. And then I'm stuck as this thing. Brene Brown, she's a professor, lecturer, author. She's probably one of the leading experts, the leading people who's talking about this idea of shame and how we process and deal with shame and things of that nature. She says this: shame corrodes the very part of us that believes we are capable of change. The number one thing that keeps us from rerouting, from getting back on track, is shame. And it's this right here. Our shame wants us to think it's too late. Our shame wants us to think that it is too late. We have gone too far. There is no way back from this. Our shame wants us to think that God in no way will ever want anything to do with you again. God can't deal with it. God doesn't want to deal with it, and he just wants to get rid of you. Shame wants you to think that it's too late for you to reroute. But just imagine with me for a second. Imagine if you could reroute. Imagine what that would look like if that piece of you, be it a big piece, a small piece, whatever it is, imagine if you could take that and instead of that being the thing that defines you, that you could reroute to where you want to be. Here's the thing. It is possible. It is possible to reroute. No matter how far down that road you are, no matter what that thing is, it is possible. This morning we're going to look at a very popular story, the Prodigal Son. I mean, it's so popular, even people who don't follow Jesus know about the parable of the Prodigal Son. And this parable is huge. There's so much in it. There's tons of stuff. We could do an entire sermon series on just this one story of Jesus. And I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that I'm going to explain the depths of every part of this story. I just want to look at one character, and I want to look at the younger brother in the parable of the prodigal son. And I want to look at his story, and I want to look at his journey and how it relates to shame and rerouting and what it can mean for us. So we're going to be in Luke chapter 15, and it says this. And he said, he is Jesus. Jesus is talking. Jesus says this: there was a man who had 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the property that is coming to me." And he divided his property between them. Now, there's something you need to know. There's a couple crazy important pieces of information that make what's happening here that much more weighty. And if you have never listened to Pastor Tim Keller talk about the parable of the prodigal son, he does an amazing job of picking all these pieces out and talking about it. And I would encourage you to go listen to it. But he says this: when the son comes to the father and asks for the inheritance, this is what Pastor Tim Keller says about that. To ask for the inheritance while the father is still alive is to wish him dead. Essentially in the story, when the younger brother comes to the dad, he comes to the father and says, Father, give me what's coming to me. He's essentially saying, I wish you were dead so that I could have the stuff that I want. What he's essentially saying is this: I want your stuff, but I don't want you. I want your stuff. I want the things that are important to me. I want the things that matter to me, but I don't want you. That makes what the son does that much weightier. He doesn't just take some money and run away. He's basically saying to the father, I don't care about you. I wish you were dead. I don't want you. And the father's response, he could have, like anybody else in that time and age, said, no, you're my son. I'm in charge. I'm the father. I'm the patriarch. You'll get what I give you when I give it to you. That's the way this works. And everyone listening would have been like, yep, that's the way that goes. But he doesn't. The father doesn't respond that way. And it says that he divides his property between them. But it's more than that. And Pastor Tim Keller talks about this as well, is that the Greek word that's actually used for property is the word bio, which is where we get biology. And so he says this: the father divided his life between the brothers. Not his property, his life between the brothers. What the father gives to the son, when the son says, I wish you were dead, is he's essentially giving him his life. The son wants nothing to do with the father. And maybe for some of you, that's where things started. Maybe that's where you're at today. Is really you didn't want anything to do with God. You wanted to do what you wanted to do. But now you found yourself in a place that you don't know what to do. Maybe for some of you, that wasn't your desired intention. You never set out to tell God, I want you, or I want your stuff, but I don't want you. But now you find yourself at a place where your actions have said that. Maybe for some of you, you just thought you were following the thing you wanted, but it's leading you away from God and leading you down a path where you're telling God, I want your stuff, but I don't want you. This is where the younger brother finds himself. He said to the father, I want your stuff, but I don't want you. I wish you were dead. And the story goes on. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country. And there he squandered his property in reckless living. And it goes on. And when he had spent everything, all of it, a severe famine arose in that country. And he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. That's important. We'll talk about that in a second. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. He squanders everything and finds himself in this place where he has nothing. And so he has to figure out what's he going to do. And he goes and he ends up finding a job. But he finds not just any job. He finds a job where he ends up feeding pigs. You have to understand, that is one of the lowest of the low jobs according to Israelite culture. Pigs were not things you sacrificed. Pigs were not things that you ate. So he's working with stuff that you wouldn't even want to be around. And as he's there, he's so in need and he's so hungry. He's looking at these things that he would never have even wanted to take care of. And he's longing. He's not kind of like, well, that would be nice. He's longing to eat what they're eating. He is at the lowest of the lows. Literally, he's in the pig crap. Literally. As he's tending to pigs. And what happened is this: shame will push us farther than we thought possible. Shame will push us to a place that we never thought we would go. Shame will push us beyond boundaries that we thought we would ever cross. And I know that this is a story that Jesus is telling, and so we're speculating some. But if we were thinking about the story, we were going to flush that story out. I guarantee that the younger brother never thought that he was going to end up feeding pigs and longing for what they're eating. And along the way, there would have probably been plenty of opportunities for him to stop, to change, to do anything. But the shame that he is there in, the shame he's experiencing, pushes him farther and farther and farther until he ends up literally in the pig crap. Can you relate to that? Have you ever related to that? Have you ever thought to yourself, how did I get here? How did I get farther down this road than I ever expected? How did I end up in this place? I think if we're all honest, there's some point in our life where we can say that, where we've said that question to ourselves, how did I get here? And that's the younger brother. He's there. How did I get here? But the younger brother starts to reroute. He starts to reroute in the only way that he knows possible to reroute. I'll show you what I mean. Check it out. But when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread? But I perish here with hunger. I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. Now I want to point out something before we go into what he does. I want you to see what I was talking about earlier between guilt and shame, because it's right here. The son feels guilt and the son feels shame. And here's where we see that. Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. That's the guilt. This is what he did. Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. That's the guilt he feels. I've wronged you. I've sinned against you. I've done something. That's the guilt. Here's the shame. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. He is feeling both the guilt of what he did, but the shame of this is now who I am. And this is what the son's feeling. And so he decides he wants to reroute. So as he thinks about rerouting, this is what he does. This is the action steps. This is what he does to reroute. And it's this. He realizes the situation he is in, and he realizes something needs to change. So he comes up with a plan. I'm going to go back to my father, and I'm going to ask him to give me a job, because that will be better than what my current situation is. And then he takes action. He doesn't just come up with the plan and then hope that it happens. He actually does something to make it happen. He gets up and he goes to the father. He comes up with a plan. But I want you to understand something as we're about to look at the plan of the younger brother. The way that he's going to try to reroute doesn't solve the shame issue that he's feeling. It's not just about doing or fixing it the way that we do something. There's more to it than that. So look what happens. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. Now, I want you to understand something real fast. The response here of the father is not the typical response of men in that culture. Men in that culture did not run. They didn't do this. The response of the father is not a typical response. But he sees his son and he runs. When they come together, and the son said to him this, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. Father, I'm guilty of this. But look at what he says. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. The son putting a plan to action to change what's going on in his life does not solve the shame that he is feeling. He still feels it because when he gets there, he says, this is now who I am. He's no longer in the situation he was in. He's no longer in the pig crap, but the shame is still there. And the father, he could have responded. Everyone listening to the story that Jesus tells would have thought the father's response would be, he's out. They would have thought the father would have said to the son, I'm sorry, you had a chance and you brought shame upon us. You did this, you did that. You're no longer welcome here. You're no longer my son. You have to go away. And if he had responded that way, all that would have done was heighten the son's sense of shame and would have made that something that stuck with him forever. And the father responds by saying this, bring quickly the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. So the response of the father is he takes the shame that the son is feeling and he throws it away. He completely throws it away. And this is why it's able to say, and they began to celebrate. They, not the father and servants, but the father and son. Everyone begins to celebrate because the shame that he thought he was going to feel is gone. This is the revolutionary thing of the gospel of God. Charles Stanley, who's a pastor, author, and theologian, he says this, when we stray from his presence, he longs for you to come back. He weeps that you are missing out on his love, protection, and provision. He throws his arms open, runs towards you, gathers you up, and welcomes you home. See, for the younger brother, the thing that made everything change was not that he set a plan in motion, was not that he worked really hard to get out of the situation and to get back home. The thing that changed wasn't that he admitted his guilt. The thing that changed stuff for the younger brother is this. Things changed when he realized he was viewed through the love that the father had for his son. Things changed for the younger brother when he realized he wasn't viewed by the father through guilt of what he had done, through shame for who he is now. Things changed when he realized that he was viewed through the love that the father had, through the compassion that the father had, through the grace that the father had, through the perfection of Jesus that's given to him. This is what changes everything for the son. This is what eliminates the shame that he was feeling. That if he was feeling that shame, he wouldn't be able to celebrate. But when he realizes that the father doesn't see him that way and the father sees him through love, he is able to celebrate. And so just like the younger brother, for us, it's this. We can live in the father's love rather than living in our shame. We can live in the father's love rather than living in our shame. And that's the beauty of rerouting. I told you the story of my mom earlier on. And it was interesting, when I went to my mom after I apologized for what I had done, and I was crying, and she was crying, and we had this moment, and she said she forgave me, but there was a part of me that always kind of wondered. I wonder if my mom remembers that. I wonder if my mom from time to time thinks back to that moment and feels the hurt of that and wonders if I still feel that way or if I feel that way from time to time. And I've always kind of thought of that, and I've always wondered. And so I was thinking of this message, and I was thinking of this story, and so I went to my mom because if I'm going to share a story like that, I want her to understand and know that it's coming, and I don't want her to be caught off guard by it. And so I told her, I said, hey, Mom, I want to tell this story. I'm doing a sermon about this, and this story came into my mind, and I want to tell this story. Is that going to be okay with you? And I told her the story of what happened and told her the time of what I said, and she looked at me with this bewilderment in her eyes, and she just said to me, I don't even remember that happening. And in this moment, I realized this is God. God doesn't tell you he forgives you, but files things away in some file cabinet, so if anything were to happen in the future, he can pull it out and he can use it as a weapon against you. That this is a picture of God, that when God says he forgives you, that he forgives you. And he takes that feeling of guilt or shame or whatever, and he throws it away. There's a beautiful quote by Henry Ward Beecher. He was a clergyman, he was a speaker, he was a social reformer in the 1800s. He says this: God pardons like a mother who kisses the offense into everlasting forgiveness. This is God. This is why we can be free from guilt, but also shame, is that God doesn't hold it against you. Psalm 103, verse 12 says this: as far as the east is from the west, so far does he remove our transgressions from us. God doesn't hold these things against us, that we can literally be free from them. We can be free from the shame that would hold us in place. So what? So what do we do? What does this look like? Where do we go from here? Well, first thing is, I want to be very clear. There's not a one-step thing. I can't just tell you to go do this thing and you're going to be good. That this is a process, and it's going to be a lifelong process. And we're going to be doing this the rest of our lives, and we're going to reroute in one area of our life, and then something else is going to happen, and we're going to need to reroute there, and something else is going to happen, and we're going to need to reroute there, and for the rest of our life, we're going to be in this process. And not everybody's going to be in the same place, and not everybody's going to look the same. But I want to give you some thoughts and some potential things that you can do and steps you can take to help you move forward. And so what I want to do is I want to remind us of the son's plan. The younger brother, his thing that he comes up with is this. He realizes the situation, realizes something needs to change. He makes a plan. This is what I'm going to do. And then he takes action. I want to take that and I want to tweak it, because we know the end of the story, right? We know what really matters. We know what really makes a difference for the younger brother. And so I want to take his plan and I want to tweak it a little bit. And I want it to look like this. Realize, take one action, plan. And so what does that mean? Well, the first one is to realize. And it's this: that the first step in rerouting is to realize that the acceptance of the Father means that you are secure. And if we truly want to reroute, if we want to move away from where we are, being stuck by shame, being stuck in a place that we don't want to be, it begins with realizing that God looks at you, that he accepts you, that he loves you no matter what, and that is secure. That no matter what you've done, no matter how far down a road you've gone, that God looks at you and says, I love you, I want you, I accept you, and you are secure in that. That is not going anywhere. And when we can accept that, when we can realize that, that's the first step. That's the biggest step in rerouting. It's not realizing that things need to change, although that might be important. It's realizing that the ability to change is grounded in the fact that the Father accepts you and loves you, and that is secure. The next step, I would say, is to take one action. Knowing you're secure, take one action. Don't think you have to come up with an entire plan of how you're going to get from where you are now to the end that you want to be. Just think, what's one action I can take? Knowing I'm secure in Christ, knowing that will never change, and I will forever be thought of that way, What's one step I can take? And I don't know what that is for you. For some of you, that might be you just need to tell someone what's going on. You need to open up to one person that you trust, knowing that you're secure. Whatever they think, you're still going to be secure in Christ. Let that one person know, hey, this is an area of my life that I feel is out of control. This is an area of my life that I feel like this is who I am now. Maybe there's a group, maybe there's a life group, maybe there's a group of people that you want to open up to. Maybe you realize that you need to get into a group like CR, like Celebrate Recovery, and find people that are going through the same thing. Whatever that looks like for you, I don't know what it is for you, but whatever that one action is, take one action. And then once you've taken that one action and you've realized that that doesn't change who you are, it doesn't change how God sees you because someone knows the thing that you've done, then we realize this, then we can plan. Once we've taken that action, then we can develop the larger plan because we know that we're secure in Christ. I want to be very clear. While it is important for us to be involved in this process, the most important piece of rerouting comes not from you trying harder, not from you gritting your teeth, not from you to come up with a plan to just stop doing a certain action or a certain thing. That might be important, but it's not the most important piece. The most important piece in rerouting comes when we realize this, and it's our bottom line. God's love is greater than our shame. This is the most important piece of rerouting. God's love is greater than our shame. God's love is more secure than our shame. And when we realize that, then we're capable of sharing what's going on, of moving past it, of rerouting back to where we want to be, rerouting back to God. Imagine for a second if we were a group of people that instead of being fueled by shame, instead of being fueled by the shame of, I wonder if people will know this about me. I wonder what people will think if they know this thing about me. I wonder if this is how everybody sees me. If instead of being fueled by that shame, we were fueled by the realization of God's love, God's grace, and God's mercy for us that says we are accepted no matter what. Imagine the ability to reroute. Imagine the ability to be free from that. And then I want you to imagine something else. Imagine if we were a group of people that we went out into Rochester and out into the world, that we were able to share the truth and reality of that with others. That we were able to go out and tell a world that is filled with people that are dealing with shame, that they don't have to, and that God's love is greater than their shame. And God's love will let them reroute from where they are to where they could be. Imagine the power and the influence that would have. Imagine the healing that could take place. That we can tell people that they can reroute to. God, I pray that we would be people who understand and realize that our standing is not in our shame. Our standing is in you. Our standing is in the work of Jesus. Our standing is in that God sees us through the perfection of Jesus, that we are secure in our standing before you. We are secure in our standing of love, of grace, of mercy, of acceptance by you. And because we are secure in those, then we can wade into those areas of shame. We can wade into those and we can reroute, being secure in you, that we can take the next step, that we can develop a plan. God, help us to be people that understand that live that, and that we then help others to understand that they can have that too, that they can be free from the shame that would hold them in place. In Jesus' name. Amen.